I'm Pavithra and I'll be your moderator for today's session. I'm quickly going to pull up my screen. Can you all see my screen okay?
We can.
Sounds good. So like Jake mentioned, it's great to have you all here as we explore a topic that's both timely and transformative, because I think particularly in this space, leveraging AI isn't just a nice to have, it can make all the difference between staying ahead and falling behind. So we've got some important topics lined up to discuss today. As we go, I would encourage you to think about how these insights might apply to your organization as well. So, a bit about me before we do a round of introductions. I am a product marketer at Rocket.Chat, where I focus on launching products and ensuring our teams and customers are set up for success. I've recently been leading the launch of our AI initiatives, focusing on supporting innovations that are secure, functional, and tailored to industries like defense. So, I'm thrilled to be joined by an incredible panel of experts who bring, I think, tremendous experience and insight to this topic. I'll just let kick things off with introductions. Chris, over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bobby. So to get things started, I'm Chris Skelly. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Rocket.Chat. I'm located in Washington, D.C., and I've been with the organization for about 3.5 years. So in my function, I manage the product, engineering, and design functions of the company, as well as other associated operations. So that's a little bit about me. I think most of you are probably familiar with Rocket.Chat, but for those who aren't, and Pavi will provide a little bit more of an intro as we go. But who we are, what does Rocket.Chat do? We provide a secure comms OS platform that's generally deployed on-prem and often deployed in air-gapped environments. We deliver chat, voice, video, whiteboarding, and AI tools that are used for collaboration by highly secure teams, right? So as you would expect, we are widely deployed across defense, intelligence agencies, critical infrastructure, other government agencies, as well as on the commercial side, financials and healthcare operations. So that's a little bit about us. One other thing to note is when we're dealing with some of the collaboration modalities, such as video or whiteboarding, we partner closely with organizations like Pexip for video and Bluescape for whiteboarding, for example. Each of these companies share really a common DNA in that we are all structured for a on-prem deploy anywhere model that is well tuned for organizations that are operating in many cases as air-gapped operations. Okay.
Thank you, Chris. Jordan.
Thanks so much, Pavi. Good to be with you all today. My name is Jordan Owens. I'm the CTO of the Americas for Pexip. My role spans a bunch of different things, but primarily is focused in two main areas, which is supporting anything and everything from the purview of technology here in the Americas, as well as working within our product organization and cultivating our strategy around products and how we present those products into the market. Similar to Rocket.Chat, we have a heavy focus into defense and government strategies, but our focus is a little bit different from the perspective of we are a video solutions provider, whether that is meetings that are hosted inside of Pexip from a capability perspective or providing interoperability into third-party meeting solutions as well. One of the things that we do is focus on building video conferencing solutions that are compliant with the way that you want to consume them, as well as to give you the tools and the mechanisms in which you can deploy them in either forward deployed or air gap solutions as well. When you look at the world through an AI perspective, we're investing heavily into AI to be used both pre and post meeting. From an in-meeting perspective, though, which is where we are spending the majority of our time today, we are heavily focused on building AI technology that can be independently deployed, independently audited, and provide capabilities inside of a meeting that actually matter to the operation of the meeting itself. This is focused around things like live captioning, focused around things like real-time translation of capabilities, but also gives you the tools and the hooks that you need in order to then be able to make sure that that AI is doing only the things that matter to you and is not overstepping its capability as well. Look forward to the discussion today.
That's terrific. And thank you for also, providing a little bit of context about what Pexip is doing in the AI space, which is a lot and moving very quickly. It's really cool stuff. Just to add on a little bit more in terms of to provide appropriate context in terms of what Rocket.Chat AI does and what we're focusing on. Two key areas. So first is conversation summarization. So as a chat tool and in dealing with a number of different modes of collaboration, we do see a lot of value, our customers see a lot of value in summarizing conversations, producing high quality summaries that can be used in a variety of ways. And then second, we offer an AI agent that supports general inquiry and analyses by users, teams of users, that is, first of all, contextually aware. We'll talk a lot about that during the course of the day today, using secure internal knowledge repositories. And then second, we also focus on our AI agent handling on ensuring that all responses are appropriately filtered and segregated based on the user's security clearance. Maybe a good segue over to you, Yong, since I know you'll be demonstrating a few of those during the course of the session.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Yong Hindy. I'm a sales engineer at Rocket.Chat. I've been here for just over 2 years now, and I'm just looking forward to providing that demo. As Chris mentioned, being able to see summarization of those threaded conversations, being able to get quick action items, concise summaries, but then also how do I query and ask it questions, whether or not it's within that group setting or a one-on-one conversation. So I'm looking forward to the discussion and maybe hopefully a discussion after this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think that was a terrific starting point. And thank you, Chris and Jordan, for also sharing what's driving your specific approach to innovation in this space. On that note, we will get started. So as you've been hearing, AI isn't just on the horizon anymore. It's here and it's quickly becoming a mission critical necessity from what we've seen. So for defense specifically, staying ahead means adopting AI. It's not just a question of if, but it's a question of when. But here's the bigger picture. Data, as we know, is no longer an asset. It's a weapon when it's in the wrong hands or it's not handled properly. And that's why AI has the potential to be your ultimate force multiplier. When done right, it doesn't just enhance what you do, it also transforms how you do it. And of course, we are going to touch upon this in this session. This isn't a journey to rush into because adopting AI requires both foresight and caution as well. If you're going to start now, I think you will be positioning your organization not just to keep pace with technology, but also to gain an edge, whether that's in intelligence, operations, or beyond. That said, the road to AI adoption, it comes with its own set of challenges. There are some powerful catalysts that is pushing us forward, but there are also some real barriers that can slow our progress. So in order to truly harness the potential of AI, I think it's important for us to understand both sides of the equation. So let's take a closer look at what's driving this shift and what might hold us back, because I think that those are the gaps that we're all trying to address and how we can navigate it effectively moving forward. So when we think about the drivers of AI adoption in defense, I think the momentum is just undeniable. Look at the numbers. Over 685 active AI projects that's spanning logistics, intelligence, and operations. That's not just progress, that's transformation in action, because I think we've had a surge in investments that's clearly fueling this shift. But as much as these advancements push us forward, they're also equally significant challenges that's holding us back. For many, what we've been hearing from our customers is the biggest hesitation is trust. One of the biggest hesitations is trust. Are AI tools accurate and reliable enough? And let's be honest, in high stakes environments like defense, where decisions can have profound consequences and impact, the hesitation is warranted for because there's no room for error or ambiguity when lives and missions are on the line. This creates a critical challenge, which is how do we show decision makers that AI tools are ready for real world mission critical use? And even more pressing, though, is data security, because a staggering 67% of organizations within the defense sector, they cite concerns over security and privacy as their top challenge to AI adoption. And here's why. In today's landscape, data isn't just information, right? Like I mentioned, it's a weapon. And securing such proprietary data that's classified and sensitive isn't just a priority, it's non-negotiable. So the path ahead is clear. We need to close those gaps. And that's precisely what Chris and Jordan mentioned in their introductions, proving that AI is ready for mission critical use and securing the confidence of decision makers. So I believe these challenges, they demand such thoughtful solutions that's in the making, and that's particularly designed to work in high stake environments. And the key here is balance. We must innovate, but we must innovate responsibly as well. So now we'll shift gears a bit and dive into the topic, which is the crux of the webinar that's absolutely critical when it comes to AI in defense, which is secure and responsible AI. Instead of going through the slides, let's just make this part more conversational. We want to get to the heart of the matter and really dive deep into three important points, which is number one, the importance of data protection. It's not just a best practice or a nice to have. I think it's a fundamental requirement in defense. And the second one is building trust and confidence by controlling and regulating who has access to data and how it's used. And the third one is what Jordan touched upon in the introduction, which is why compliance and auditability can't be an afterthought. They must be front and center in everything we do with AI. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll get started. So, Chris, I've got a question, which is we're hearing a lot of concerns around sensitive data getting exposed because when employees use AI tools, a big part of non-public company information is being fed into these tools, which is why I think many organizations, and rightly so, have restricted or banned AI usage. So what are some steps that you think organizations can take to implement AI securely without jeopardizing proprietary information that's classified?
Got it. Yeah. So it's a really good question. So, first of all, that is what we see. Data security is currently the biggest blocker for AI initiatives. And to be very frank about it, it should be, right? That should be the number one concern as we're getting started with AI initiatives. So, four things kind of come to mind that we should be focused on. So first, organizations, especially within defense and intelligence, should be concentrating on deploying their AI architecture on-prem, air-gapped, in whatever enclave, SCIF, or network topology that they're working within. What that does, it's doing a couple of key things. First, from a security perspective, it is the way to ensure that no data leaves the building, right? Full control of your data at all points in time. The second part, which is talked about a little bit less, but it's really important, is it helps you to break open the black box of AI, right? And so we'll be talking about this as we go, that there are different components to the architecture in terms of what language model you use, what augmentation methods you use in terms of fine tuning or RAG or function calling. And by operating on-prem, controlling those tools, you can quantitatively and qualitatively evaluate what's working and what's not. So that's the first thing. The second, it's key to ingest internal proprietary knowledge. You're creating a tool, not a toy, right? You don't want this thing to tell you about world history or write sonnets for you. It's meant, as Pavi said, to be a force multiplier for your team, to accelerate analysis and provide and synthesize great responses to questions so that the operators can be more effective and move more quickly. So ingesting knowledge is absolutely key. When doing that, a couple things come into play. First, you need to maintain data lineage throughout the process, right? You can't be ingesting data that is at different security classifications without maintaining that classification data, the source data, expiration and replacement indicators throughout the entire process. So from initial ingestion through preparing that data to be essentially language model enabled and accessible, all of that data lineage needs to be maintained. Okay. The third key thing to think about is security classification filtering needs to be managed and enabled across all interaction points. And the resulting data that's been ingested, of course, needs to be encrypted at rest and in transit, of course, and considering different options to segment encryption by classification levels also should be considered. So that's a third key consideration. And then the last one, this kind of gets back to cracking open the black box. You should really be following an agent or agentic model, where you're using an agent as a wrapper that represents, for a particular function, what language model are you interacting with? What vector repository that you've populated with internal data are you accessing? What are the details of the prompts that are used? And how is context being managed so that as the language model provides, synthesizes a response or an analysis based on a user inquiry, that it's using the appropriate context and that you're able to actually prove the validity of the context that's being used. So, Bobby, those are kind of the four things that we generally talk to our customers about as baseline things to fully address the data security issues and make sure that you're starting from a good foundation.
I think that's super helpful, Chris, and thanks for that insight. Jordan, I'd also love to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah, for sure. And I think I'll extend what Chris was saying a little bit, because I think there's a key part to what he was saying that I think bears a little bit of extension onto it, right? Which is this idea of trust but verify. So, the reality is that AI only works when it has access to some of the most sensitive data that an organization needs to maintain, because that only then can it make the decisions to incorporate and to encompass all of the various bits and bytes that are important to make that decision. The reality is that us as vendors have no idea what you all do on a daily basis. Yes, we talk to you in generalities. Yes, you help us understand at least as much as you can about how you're using our technology and how it's going to support your mission and so on and so forth. But the reality is, when it comes to the nitty-gritty and the day-to-day, we have no clue on what's being done, which means AI models, AI systems can't be trained using real mission data, because that data doesn't leave the enclave. That data doesn't leave the classification status. That data, it's not a good practice necessarily anyway, right? So all of those things are true. So what does that ultimately mean, right? It means that you're going to put an AI model into a situation where it may or may not have any real direct exposure, and it's going to give you some output. So how do you then validate that output? How do you know that it's doing the right things? How do you make sure that it's not leaking data to systems? All of that ultimately comes down to auditability. And Chris touched on this directly, right? But the reality is that you have to be able to take the AI models and the AI solutions and the AI products that you're leveraging and be able to validate that they're working the way that they're supposed to be working. They're making decisions based on some defendable logic that is being used with them, and that the data that they're being exposed to isn't being misused or misappropriated in any way, shape, or form. Now, our tools that have been deployed today, are they perfect in this regard? No, they're never perfect, right? I mean, this is a journey, not a destination. But I think it's important that when you all are looking to deploy AI, that you're working with organizations that understand that auditability is almost as, if not just as important as the output that you get, and that they understand that this is a journey that we need to work together on. We need to partner together on to make sure that you get all of the tools and the hooks and the necessary bits and bytes that you need to make sure that the tools you're using are doing the right thing and are doing it in the right way as well. So hope that makes at least some semblance of sense. But I just wanted to extend on that point that Chris made, because I think it's an extremely important point when you look at the world of AI, especially in sensitive situations.
I really like that observation. It's quite compelling, Jordan. So I think now building on that, as we look at scaling AI adoption, I think these post-deployment audits, they become crucial to mitigate data risks. So how do you think, Jordan, that defense organizations can implement AI systems that also allow for such effective audits?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. And I would be lying if I said I think we have the perfect answer, because I don't think we do. I think this is still an emerging market. This is an emerging world that we don't truly understand, that we haven't truly figured out what the answer to this is. The reality is that AI starts to get deployed more and more. It's actually going to generate a volume of data that we're not used to being able to consume and being able to audit, which I think, it builds the practice of start small and grow. When you look at the world through deploying any new system, any new capability, any new functionality, any new solution set as a whole, you really want to start with a super simple, super focused control group, if you will, so that you can make sure that you build all of the right surrounding tools, surrounding practices, and surrounding audit principles that you need in order to be able to take that and make sure that it's doing the right thing. Because only when you do it right in a small segment do you believe that you can do it right when that actually expands out, right? The easiest way to set this stuff up for failure is to try to do too much out of the gate, at least in my opinion. I could certainly be wrong, but at least in my opinion, that's the way I see the world.
No, absolutely. I think it's important to start small to build the momentum. And I think small scale pilots are a great way to do that. And we will talk about it in a greater detail in just a couple of minutes. But before that, I think just building on the importance of audits and ensuring transparency, I think it's true that audits do help track what's happening in the moment. But I think it's also crucial to make sure, right, that only authorized users are seeing the right data. And this is very important because I think in such environments we can't second guess access because time is of the essence. We need to keep operations fast and efficient. So I think, Chris, the you were mentioning the third point, which was the last one. What are some strategies that organizations can implement to ensure very secure, controlled, and regulated access, but without compromising on the speed and effectiveness of decision making?
Yeah. So a couple things. We've already touched on a few, but I'll keep beating the drum of classification aware queries, right? We need to filter all queries based on the user's classification is a fundamental key thing. That one of the things to consider here is kind of the mechanics of how we manage general inquiry and analysis. And so a couple of different components are involved. So first is the large language model itself. And then second is the augmentation strategy. And as I think people on the phone largely know, there are three kind of broad augmentation strategies that can be used. You can fine tune a model. You can use a RAG, retrieval augmented generation model, which is what we currently focus on, and I'll talk a little bit about. Or you can use function calling, which is something we are able to do and we're exploring. But as Jordan was saying, in the go slow, get your proof points, it's not currently our area of focus. So, in relation to into the RAG model and how it promotes the kind of agility and ability to move fast that we're talking about, the reason that we focus there is fine-tuning a model is a heavy periodic batch process, right? And especially in the world of defense and intelligence, by the time you fine-tuned the model, you already have data that's out of date. You need to consume additional data. And so that's why we're focusing on RAG. We can ingest data in batch and ingest data continually is point number one. And then second, we don't preclude the option of interacting with a fine-tuned model, right? You can get both. You can fine-tune a model for a particular function, and you can also augment with our RAG structure. So that's one thing to consider, that as we work with our customers, RAG provides a really good way to get out of the gate fast, providing high quality responses to the team, high quality synthesized analyses. It kind of brings me to the last point, though, we haven't really talked about yet, which is the feedback loop. Going back to breaking open the black box of AI. One of the things that we really do focus on is evaluating the responses quantitatively, right? So a couple things to think about. All organizations should have a good mechanism for users to access source attribution when an analysis or response is generated by the large language model. We facilitate that through our flexible prompt engineering that we offer. And then secondly, it's also worth analyzing that data in detail to ensure that the context that is built in the retrieval of the proprietary data prior to feeding that to the large language model for synthesizing a response is contextually appropriate. And you can do that mathematically. You can do that by evaluating the vectors that have been returned, the language vectors that are used to build that context and deliver it to the large language model. The simple way to think of it is it's kind of like if you have an analyst and you give them 10 file boxes of information and ask them to go through and produce particular summarized analysis. If you give them the wrong file boxes, their analysis is going to be wrong. If you give them incomplete set of file boxes, their analysis is going to be incomplete. So by implementing on-prem, having a structured way of tying back to the source attribution, we can actually mathematically evaluate whether the contents of those file boxes that are being delivered to the LLM to synthesize analysis are the right information, the best information, the most appropriate information for the request.
I think that is indeed impactful. I just have a follow-up question. So, how does RAG handle the trade-off between the quality of the generated content and also the speed of retrieval?
Yeah, so a few things to think about. The RAG component and the data pipeline that we use needs to be scalable and responsive. So there is a speed of response. Two things come into mind on performance that everyone should be aware of. So the larger the data set you build, then the more processing time there will be. But the more important factor also from the language vector mathematics, the higher the risk of retrieving inappropriate data or not the most relevant data. So that needs to be considered. It's something that we focus on in terms of tuning the capabilities and providing visibility to customers. So I'm not sure if that kind of fully answered your question, but our focus, to be clear, is generally not on the response time and performance of the RAG engine. It's on the performance from the perspective of considering whether it's returning the most relevant information for the inquiry that's been made.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris. Jordan, would you like to weigh in or offer further commentary on this?
I think Chris has captured it quite well. I mean, again, it comes back to, and this is obviously a bit of a different twist than auditability, but it comes back to how do you just verify? How do you know that the system is working the right way with the right data set at the right time? And I think that's the challenge that we're all faced with at the moment. I mean, AI is an incredibly powerful tool. It's one of the most exciting things that has hit this tech market in a very long time. But at the same time, to think that we're building systems that are thinking independently without being told exactly what to do is scary, right? And so I don't think we should avoid the fear. I think we should embrace the fear, but make sure that we have the right hooks to verify and validate that the tools are doing the right thing. So I know that whether it's done via a large language model in and of itself, whether it's being done via just a basic LLM, whether it's being done via not even using large language models and just simply building AI to interpret real time so that things can be made, can be adjusted to fit the user's needs. You know, whatever solution or twist you're using for AI, that's one thing. The key is, can you just verify? Can you validate that the tool is doing what it needs to be done? Can you ensure that the tool is working within the compliance metrics that you have? Can you ensure that the people that are administering and managing the tool aren't able to use the tool in a nefarious or negative action? All of those things are key important components to leveraging AI in this new world. And I think that's, you know, they're not easy answers, but they're also answers that are important. There are questions that are important to ask and answers that are important to seek out, even if they're not perfect as it stands today. So no, I think Chris, long-winded way to say, I think Chris has hit a lot of the nails on the head.
Yeah, you brought up an interesting point also that kind of ties back to one of the terms that Pavi had used. AI in this context needs to be viewed as a force multiplier, right? It's a tool that's being used by the operators. It is never a replacement for those operators. Yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Jordan, that was a great way of summarizing the key points that we've discussed so far. And I think with so much at stake, just getting relevant, contextually appropriate outputs is just essential. So we'll just kick things off. And I think the next step is for organizations to think about, where do you start? How do you get started? How do you start small, build momentum? And I think we spoke about this, that pilots are a great way to do that. And in the introduction, you'd mentioned that it's important for organizations to have a very controlled focus group of sorts so that they have a step-by-step approach, test in smaller controlled environments before they scale up. So what does a solid pilot, in your opinion, look like? How can these smaller initial projects build momentum for bigger things? Because I think it's the short way of getting approval and buy-in across the organization.
Is that one for me, Bobby?
That was important.
Okay. All right. Just checking. Yeah, great point. And as Jordan was saying, starting small and evolving and progressing is the way to go. So, a few thoughts to think about. So, one, when we're dealing with augmenting the responses in a general inquiry model, and we're ingesting internal data. A lot of that internal data and information has been produced by human beings, and there's always the opportunity for ingesting incorrect data, right? And that introduces kind of a garbage in, garbage out problem, right? And you have to be really careful about it. So one thing to think about with pilots, especially in terms of the RAG ingestion and populating your repository of proprietary data, is start with confirmed correct data, right? If you have a repository of approved briefs, for example, that can be ingested, that is a better place to start than ingesting a team's conversations, where we all make mistakes. We get something wrong, and if it's ingested, that can essentially pollute the data store. So that's one thing to think about. Another thing to consider is producing summaries is a really good way to prove the efficacy of your model at different tasks. When you produce a summary, you can then, again, mathematically analyze the results, where you compare essentially the language vector distributions, proximities of the input data to the summary. And by determining kind of the mathematical proximity of the outputs with the inputs, you can gauge whether the language model is providing high quality summaries. So it's a great place to start because you can get your proof points. They're inarguable, they're clear, you know exactly where you stand before you progress on to additional steps. So those are a couple things to think about. And then kind of touching on what Jordan was talking about with auditability and traceability, think in terms of structuring your prompts in a way that gives users and the administrators full visibility back to the reference sources, so you can evaluate, as I mentioned before, whether you're filling the file boxes for the right things when submitting a request to the language model.
That's an interesting take, Chris. I think, Jordan, you're going to say, what's your viewpoint on this?
Yeah, I think to me anyway, the most important thing out of this whole thing is exactly where Chris started, which is the source data for the AI model to be able to interpret. And I'll be super brief on this, right? But there was a study that was done around medical diagnostics and using AI within medical diagnostics. And they ran 3 different control groups. They ran a control group of just doctors taking a bunch of information in, making a diagnosis based on that information. They ran a control group of doctors that used AI and in partnership, and then they did a control group of just AI alone. And in this specific study, which it needs a lot more work, and again, I'm not even quoting the study, so there's a little bit of take this for a grain of salt. The AI alone was able to diagnose more effectively than doctors were, whether it was doctors with or without AI. Now, the reality of that whole thing, though, is you really dig into this study, the reality of the whole thing was the reason that AI was so effective was because AI took in a very controlled, detailed set of diagnostic inputs to be able to then interpret that data and give you a diagnostic output. And so the real important part of that is if you're going to use AI, and you give it junk as an input, you cannot expect AI, or really any technology for that matter, to give you good stuff as an output. AI is not magic from the perspective of it can take something, polish it up, and give you a good output, even though the input is suboptimal. And so it really is important that you take time and you take the right effort to structure the data that you're going to use as the input for your AI model, and use it in such a way that you can make sure that you are getting a focused output on exactly what you want to do. And again, this is important across the entirety of the AI spectrum, whether it's using interpretive AI, AGI, whether it's just AI that is conversion AI, whatever the case may be, regardless of how you do it, that input data is super important. And so as you start to roll out, coming back to the pilot concept, as you start to roll this out in control concepts, you have to start small and start as small as you think you can. Avoid scope creep, avoid this concept of, well, wouldn't it be cool if it could do this? I wonder what would happen if we put AI outside of its comfort zone and had it try this other thing. Start extremely focused and extremely small, because you will organically expand that circle over time anyway. And let that organic expansion happen, but only when you validate that the small focused circle of the start works to your benefit. Because otherwise you are setting yourself up for failure. And that failure will be resulting in lack of trust, belief that the technology doesn't work, belief and feelings that AI is broken out of the gate and you've got to wait years and years and years for it to get better. And although that may end up being true, you would rather know that that's true based on a factual data set than you would then based on an interpretation of invalid outputs as well.
Absolutely. I think the challenge for teams that are just starting out, I think it's very hard for them to figure out where to begin. Selecting the right use cases, that is key to setting the stage for success. And I think, Jordan, what you mentioned, it just gives them a very clear and straightforward path on identifying the first AI use cases to ensure that it aligns with the broader strategic goals, so to say. So I think it's terrific. But as we wrap up, I'd also love to hear from the both of you. If you could offer one key piece of advice to defense leaders and teams here today, what mindset or approach should they adopt to ensure that AI becomes a trusted long-term enabler, despite all the risks that we spoke about?
I guess I'll take the first shot at that one, and then Chris, I'll let you wrap up.
Sounds good.
So for me, I think the key to this is going back to exactly what we were just talking about, which is starting small and growing. And the reason that I think that is the most important thing is I'll translate that back into at least part of my role as well, right? Which is as we go out and we build products, the first thing that we start with is an ideal customer profile. And the hardest part on building an ideal customer profile is making sure that that ideal customer profile is so tight that it is defendable in all cases. And it is an extremely hard process that we take on as product people as we go out and we get ready to build products, because you want to build a very focused, very dedicated product directly to that ideal customer profile, knowing that a sales team will organically and naturally expand the scope of that ideal customer profile out to an addressable customer profile. If you start too broad, your addressable customer profile becomes even more broad, which then means you're trying to sell a product to the wrong audience. The reason that I think that's applicable into this conversation is as you start with AI, it's going to be really easy because it's interpretive technology. It's going to be really easy to put that technology into a case where it's going to fail. And so spending the time and the effort necessary to really understand your problems and how you need technology to assist in your problems, and then taking those problems and making them smaller, takes a tremendous amount of time and effort. But unless you take on that time and that effort, the technology won't be set up to find the right amount of success. Will it work for you? It absolutely may still work for you. But you're just losing that level of guarantee. You're losing that level of commitment that the technology can make to you in your behalf. And so in a world where there is already going to be an inherent communications gap between you and the vendor, because you can't tell us of what you do every day, we inherently don't know what you do every day. You need to make sure that you're spending enough time on your side to isolate that stuff down, because we can't help you in that journey just because of that inherent communication gap that the two of us have. And so it does shift a little bit of the burden to you. As a product person, that stinks. I would rather take on that burden myself, but I also recognize that in our conversations that we have, there's a lot of that I can't take on, and I get it. And I will do my best as a product person to make sure that you understand how to set the technology up for success. But again, at the same time, that some of that burden does ride with you. And so I would just encourage you, no matter how small you think the problem is, try to make it smaller, because that's how you will set things up for success. Anyway, that's my best piece of advice.
Chris, before you get started, Jordan, I just love the last statement you made, and I think it's totally worth printing on a t-shirt and giving it away.
Nice. All right. Well, I'm going to maybe break your format a little bit here, Pavi. I apologize for that, but for me, it's a checklist, right? And so it's not one thing, but if I wrap that a little bit, it's It's to find your operating checklist and stick to it. So ours and a few things that we think are appropriate for inclusion within defense and intelligence is, first of all, you're selecting on-prem tools that you can deploy wherever your mission specifics require. Second, everything you do needs to be classification aware all the way through. Data lineage needs to be managed at all steps. Third, really consider your data expiration strategy. We haven't really talked about this today, but it's really important. When you're ingesting knowledge, something that had to do with a particular issue, let's say you have weather satellite data that's coming in, a month from now, it's not valid. You need to make sure to expire out data that's no longer relevant, so it doesn't get included in responses. Fourth, this kind of ties back to what Jordan was saying. Evaluate model performance. Each element, insist on having solutions that give you the tools and visibility so that you can really evaluate quantitatively, qualitatively, use the data of the outputs to build confidence, get your proof points so that as you progress, you know exactly what you're getting and you're addressing any of the flaws in the responses or the way that the responses are being built. And it leads to the last two items. Context. One of the biggest things in AI is management of context, right? I encourage everyone to be aggressive on how they think about context if they're getting into generative responses, right? So to give an example, OpenAI, they use threads essentially as what I consider to be kind of a context crutch, right? And the reason for that is, let's say you're having a particular threaded conversation. People, humans, us, we tend to change topics, right? We're talking about dogs, all of a sudden we're talking about cats. And so that thread isn't really a good representation of context. Whereas yesterday we may have had another discussion about dogs, right? Your real tight context to give the right information if you want a response relating to dogs actually goes cross thread. So think about the context structure and concepts that you're using. We're happy to share ours as we go. So if you have questions about that, absolutely feel free to reach out. And then that's the final point from my perspective. We are learning every day, right? We learn from the work that we're doing. We learn from the feedback of our customers. And as we all kind of are working within this space, we can all learn from what we're seeing in terms of what's working well and what isn't. And definitely feel free to reach out to me or Jordan as you guys are kind of getting rolling with your journey, or maybe you're farther along and you have feedback for us. Definitely encourage that as you go.
Thank you, Chris. I think that's a fantastic checklist, and it's a great starting point for any organization that's looking to start your implementing AI, because it's not just about jumping in headfirst, it's about setting the right foundation step by step. And I think getting those initial building blocks that you mentioned in place is very important. Thank you, Jordan and Chris, for the incredible insights that you have shared with us today. Now, let's see how all of this comes together in action. Yong will walk us through a live demo of Rocket.Chat AI. He's been instrumental in implementing AI for many of our customers and helping them get the most out of it. So, over to you, Yong.
Thank you, Bobby. Hi, everyone. So good morning, good afternoon again. So we're going to be taking a look at how AI again can support defense operations, maybe other types of initiatives by summarizing critical conversations, ingesting proprietary information securely, and responding to specialized queries, those prompts, all while maintaining the highest security standards. So we're going to walk through a couple of different demonstrations. That first one, being able to summarize threaded conversations, right? There's a lot of conversations that can happen in a channel or a given room. But then, I want to be able to get actionable items. I want to get a concise summary. And then additionally, like, how do I prompt that AI so that I get a contextual, relevant, and accurate response? So I can do that in a couple of different ways, whether or not that's within that channel or room or a one-on-one conversation with that AI. So let me go ahead and I'll share my screen. If I can find the share button. Here. Okay, and then I will zoom in because I know that my resolution for this monitor is Going to make things difficult to read. So, okay, so I have Rocket.Chat up, and we're going to touch on that threaded conversation summarization. So again, just imagine you're part of a high-level defense task force, or maybe you just been away for a few days, or there's been a lot of great collaboration, as Chris was mentioning, right? We have different threads ongoing, and this is where Rocket.Chat AI can step in and help you catch up to those conversations by quickly summarizing them, any one of those threaded conversations. So in this workspace, I have a lot of different channels, and in Special Ops, I have a number of different threaded conversations that have been ongoing. I can open up any one of these. I'll open up the last one, and we have a lot of conversation that has happened. I can pick at any point and summarize until here. And again, it's going to be giving me those action items, those major updates, that concise summary, and it's going to let me know it sent me a direct message. I can jump over to that, open it up. And again, it's about getting that accurate response, getting those action items. So, as you can see, like AI is providing that clear overview. So you can quickly understand, maybe it's key decisions or maybe next steps that you need to take without needing to go through and sift through those long threaded conversations, right? So not being able to have to go and read all those messages.
One thing to note here also, it kind of ties back to some of the things we were talking about of beginning in a very controlled manner. The summarizations here and the prompt that generates them is structured to ensure that outside context is not included, right? So it is a factual summary of what is included in there, and that ensures that you don't have any additional information leaking in. It is indeed a factual summary on what was actually included in that conversation.
Cool. Thank you, Chris. To jump into that second, right, we're going to be querying or prompting the AI to essentially summarize a security threat report. So this has been fed to that RAG pipeline, and I want that contextual or that relevant response based on that report. So if I jump back to Special Ops, and then in this case, I want to keep everyone on the same page. So again, defense agency confidentiality, again, is paramount. You want to make sure that your data is within your four walls. So again, that Rocket.Chat AI is allowing you to feed that proprietary data without risking exposure to public AI models, to exposing your data to the outside world. So I can prompt it, and I'm going to take a little bit too. So I'm going to go ahead and prompt that AI again. It's a secure report that has been ingested by that RAG pipeline, and I get a nice concise response and contextually relevant based on the data that's been fed there. So again, it's ensuring that AI's response is going to be contextually relevant, accurate, drawing from secure mission critical data without exposing that sensitive information, again, to those public models, to the outside world. And then the last piece, right? Like if I have, I need to get action items, maybe I don't want to create additional noise within this channel, within the special ops room. I can actually prompt the AI individually. And again, it's still pulling from that exact same data. So I'll just ask it a different question. So in this case, what, might help if I can spell right. And we should get a different response, right? So now I'm asking it for action items, right? With that report, we asked for a summary. Now I'm asking for action items. What are the next steps based on what we found? So I open it up, and I should get those actionable steps to be taken. So even in a private conversation, right, the AI is equipped to provide that accurate mission-aligned answers in real time. And again, it's about safeguarding your data that it uses. And kind of just to close it out, and then I know a lot others kind of fill in some more details. So again, Rocket.Chat AI, when we think about defense agencies or just in general enhancing operational efficiency through summarization of those threaded conversations, secure data ingestion, making sure that it's the most relevant data that's being fed there, giving it to your users, and having that real-time interaction. So, and all of this is in a fully self-hosted in your secure environment. So as part of the solution, we're continuing to enhance it. So introducing classification mechanisms, as Chris mentioned, being able to make sure that data that's being fed into that RAG pipeline is tagged with classifications. Maybe this is secret, top secret, classified, unclassified data, and then making sure when the users are attempting to access that data that they have the appropriate access level to make that query. So again, it's not just even that data being on premise, but being able to make sure we also have controls, a robust and secure access control to your data. So, thank you. If there's any questions, please ask, and thank you.
Thank you, Yong. I think that brings us to the end of the session. I think thank you everybody for the valuable insights and to everyone here joining us. Now we'd love to hear from you. So let's open the floor to questions. Please feel free to ask us any question that you might have, anything that's on your mind, and we'd be happy to answer them.
So it looks like there's one question already in here, and this could be for any of you. So as AI technology advances, how can defense agencies adapt their current systems to keep up with these changes? What should be prioritized to ensure their infrastructure is ready for long-term AI integration?
Chris, you're on mute.
Thank you. I do that at least 14 times a day, but yeah. So very good question. A few key things to think about, and the first thing is start with a flexible solution, right? That is the most important thing. When I was talking about general inquiry, you're always thinking about augmenting the responses with your internal proprietary data. Otherwise, you just have a toy, not a tool, right? So think about solutions that enable you to follow multiple augmentation strategies in relation to the responses. And so it's one thing that, as I was talking about it, we currently focus primarily on RAG because that is the best opportunity to provide a high quality incremental value to support mission operators, right? That's the fastest way to value for us. But we've also developed it in a way that we can interact with multiple fine-tuned models, right? So we're not precluding fine-tuned models as part of our approach, and that's why we use the agent model, which means that if you have multiple agents, you can use multiple fine-tuned models. So we don't exclude that, even though it's not our current focus. Same thing, function calling is an area that organizations are exploring, but not really implementing. The way to think of function calling is it's the ability for the agent to retrieve live data as part of preparing the response, right? So not data that's been ingested into the RAG repository, but the ability to reach out to another system live, retrieve up to the minute data and incorporate it into responses. And we're not doing that, but we've created an architecture that allows us to do any of those three. So a little bit of a general answer, but that's the way I think people should be focusing on is realize that there will be multiple strategies and new ones will emerge and come into play. So the architecture you put into place should be flexible enough to accommodate them as your organization begins to experiment.
Perfect. Great answer. Oh, Jordan, did you want to add on there?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you don't mind, I'd like to add something real quick. And this is less about the technology, but more about the implementation of the technology, which is establish a feedback loop. So, as you roll out any new system, as any new capability within your organization, how are you going to validate that capability is providing the value to your users that you expect it to provide? How are you going to get the feedback of what's working, what's not working, and then incorporate that feedback into a V2 of that same model? And so, as you do think about rolling out AI, especially when you're looking about it from the AI perspective in terms of long-term value will only be created and will only be sustained if you have a good feedback loop that allows you to adapt the use of the technology as your needs change, because long-term, your needs will change. And so therefore your needs of how you use and how you leverage the technology will also change. So again, getting that feedback loop figured out so that you can make sure that you understand how to adapt the technology is going to be key.
Yeah, absolutely. We have one more question here. What factors should influence the choice of vector repositories?
I'd say the number one consideration is ensuring that you can maintain and manage flexible metadata on every embedding that you add to the vector database. Ultimately, that's the key thing. If you're using a vector database that is not providing a good facility for handling that metadata, then you're not going to be able to manage data lineage appropriately. So for me, that's the number one consideration.
Absolutely. Well, that's all the questions that I see here, and we're right at time anyway. So thank you everybody for your time in the audience and to the speakers as well. If you're interested in learning more about Rocket.Chat, please check out these websites that I will put right here in the chat for everybody. And there's also additional information on the screen to contact our Rocket.Chat team here at Carahsoft. We hope you found this event informative for you and your organization. If you have any questions or would like any more information, please contact our team here at Carahsoft.